You run into them at Starbucks and you see them pull up in their nice car, talking on the phone. They sound busy and important and excited. And you see them drive off with everything you hope for. And you're like, man, I guess I want to be that. And then you get up close and personal, and it's nothing that it's cracked up to be. So that was kind of eye-opening for me. But it made me even more depressed because I'd been spending 10 years of my life trying to do that. And so I started doubling down and tripling down on my drinking.
Hey guys, it's Donnie here, and I just want to let you know that we've recently launched a content development company, and this company helps people get social content. You know you need to put out a lot of content nowadays to get engagement out there in all your social platforms. Well, we've come up with a really cool way to help you get videos, blog posts, memes, social posters, and infographics for whatever social site you need. So check us out at successchamps.us and learn more about how you can get social content for your social media.
Support for this podcast comes from Point Blank Safety Services and Blue Family Fund. Blue Family Fund, helping dependents of law enforcement families on their journeys. Blue Family Fund is a nonprofit that raises funds and offers financial support through higher education scholarships for dependents of law enforcement officers and by providing financial assistance for families of fallen law enforcement officers. Every dollar donated will go to the families of police officers, either through scholarships to dependents of police officers or as aid to fallen officers' families. Visit us at bluefamilyfund.com.
You're listening to Donnie Success Champions, where I believe everybody is on a journey. Life is all about the stories you can tell and teach later. You're going to hear the stories of people who have overcome hardships, failures in life to find success along their journey. All right, guys, this is going to be a cool episode. You know me, I love hearing people's things and the things we're getting into. So I'm bringing on Garrett, and we're going to talk a lot about how we became a coach and a hypnotherapist. Man, we explore hypnotherapy, and we talk about his story and journey along the way. But you get to hear me pick on him a little bit about what it means to actually hypnotize somebody and how it actually works. Fun episode, guys. Talk soon. All right, guys, bringing another fun one today. It's going to be a new buddy of mine, Garret Wood. He's out there in the old California area, and I love giving those people a hard time, but he's like a pretty straight shooter, so it should be a good time. Garret, welcome to the show, my friend. Please tell us your story.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity to come and share with your listeners a little bit about myself.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been fun doing this show and hearing everybody's bit of story. Give us a little bit of background on you. So we know where to poke and prod and make fun of you if we can.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, let's start with the easy stuff to make fun of me. I'm a hypnotherapist, massage therapist, and a strength coach. So there's some fodder for you.
Oh, yeah, we're in.
Yeah.
Wait, so do you hypnotize before you massage?
No. Yeah, right.
So a hypnotherapist, a massage therapist, and a coach.
Yes.
Man, so if you can't hypnotize them, you offer to massage them, and if that doesn't work, you'll coach them out of their problems.
Yeah. Therapy is kind of like coaching. You're just talking to the subconscious mind. And then massage therapy, the way I do it isn't lay down with music on. It's lights on, clothes on. And we're looking for performance and pain points and trying to work through that and coach people how to get that for themselves. Nice. So it's a little different than what you imagine, right? There's no Ennio playing in the background.
Right. So how in the world did you get into all this? I mean, there's no way in heck in third grade, and I had the best third grade teacher in the world. Her name was Miss Smiley, which is just a phenomenal name for a third grade teacher, right? But if Miss Smiley would have been your teacher and asked you what you wanted to be when you grew up in third grade, there's no way in hell you said I wanted to be a hypnotherapist, massage therapist, and a coach. So how the heck did all that happen?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to phrase that. Grew up with a story about money that was pretty, like money was lacking. And if you had more money, you would have all your problems solved. And that was kind of the belief that my family had and their family had before them. And I grew up with that, and I knew that working hard was what you needed to do to break out of that. And so when I went to college, I thought, I'd hang out with the guys that have the money, the Morgan Stanley guys, the Liam brothers, those kind of guys. And so I was busy getting coffee for everybody. And these guys had the nice R8s and, the nice Audis and the station wagons with the German station wagons. And I was getting them coffee, and I was bartending at night, and these guys were drinking more than I was at the time. And they were sneaking off and having liaisons with each other at the offices, and they had more issues than I'd ever seen before, up close and personal. And it was interesting. I got propositioned inappropriately a few times myself, and I was like, man, this is a wild world. The money isn't solving any of these people's problems. It's making it worse.
I had a very similar experience when I tried to go after corporate America. I always thought success was, the nice suits, the nice cars, the condos, the ancillaries that come along with it, the drugs, the drinking, it was really one of those things that when I got it all, I'm like, oh, this sucks. Right?
Right.
I think because TV and everything else really paints this picture of that's what success is supposed to be, you don't know any better until you actually get to pull the curtain back behind it,
Yeah. I'm glad I saved myself a few years sneaking in, kind of behind that curtain, right? Dr. Oz.
Right.
The great and powerful, just kind of watching these guys. You run into them at Starbucks and you see them pull up in their nice car, talking on the phone. They sound busy and important and excited. And you see them drive off with everything you hope for. And you're like, man, I guess I want to be that. And then you get up close and personal, and it's nothing that it's cracked up to be. So that was kind of eye-opening for me. But it made me even more depressed because I'd been spending 10 years of my life trying to do that. And so I started doubling down and tripling down on my drinking. And there probably wasn't a night that went by where I had so many drinks I couldn't keep track of them at the bar. And I'm cashing out this drawer trying to add up all the, the till for the end of the night.
So you're a regular bartender at that point.
Yeah, that was my night gig.
Right.
For school and, interning, getting coffee for people. So it was wild, man. But it was pretty rough too, because then at the night at the bar, you're hanging out with people, having fun, watching them spend their money. And man, it was just bad on both sides. There was no light at the end of the tunnel for that.
Yeah, I remember my times because I bartended for a couple of years. Yeah. And for me, it was twofold. I was still in that crux of what the hell do I want to be when I grow up. So bartending was there. All my buddies were doing it. And at some point along the way, I realized I needed to grow up again. But it was really wild for me to watch how unhappy these people were that were trying to use alcohol as an escapism from a life they couldn't stand, and then turn around and regret the next day for the things they did the night before. But to make it better, they just rinse, wash, repeat, and do it all over again. 100%. As a bartender, we were jumping in and doing that all along with them. Everything along with them.
Everything, yeah.
Yeah.
It was. I never felt bad for him because at the time I was one of them, right?
Right.
So I didn't understand, right? But I saw some pretty interesting stuff. It was a college town, so you get everybody that was freshly 21 or trying to pretend to be, and then you would get everybody up 45, 55, 65, and it was just a different time of the night that they would come in. But, closing, if it's a college town, there's this big cross street there. There's 7, 8 bars on every side of the corners of the street. So at 2:00, it would just rush 200, 300, 400 people just slobbering all over themselves, stumbling, rolling ankles, and they'd all sit out there, and then you'd really see our true instincts come out, uninhibited by any shame or guilt or embarrassment or the next day. And it was pretty wild to watch. It was a pretty good learning experience of what human behavior is really all about.
Yeah, no kidding. I can't say, Mardi Gras would be the only thing I could say would be close to that, just let it all loose and hang out. That's wild. Because when we got done bartending, we all ended up at one buddy's house. And, that was for us, we had drank our entire shifts, that was like getting off at 5:00 in the afternoon, just happened to be 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning after you took a couple hours to close the bar down. And,
right.
We'd play poker until the sun came up because there's nothing else to do. All the bars and everything else are closed. So then you drank and played cards until the sun come up. Then you go get a couple hours sleep and you do it all over again,
That's exactly right.
Except you were doing a courier job in between, so you were at least trying to be a little bit more responsible than I was.
Yeah, I was trying to go to school and do that, so I got a few Fs on my GPA that hold me down.
Yeah, I didn't even attempt the college thing. I did the Marine Corps route. That was plenty, and So how long were you bartending, and what was that kind of straw that you finally said, okay, I got to get out of this racket?
I did bartending on and off for 13 years.
Holy cow, dude. Wow.
Yeah.
That's a long time slinging drinks, brother.
It's a long time. Yeah. It was fun. I learned a lot. The first half was really fun. And then when I decided to get sober, whatever that meant for me at the time, it stopped being as much fun, but it was still paying the bills and it was still, a good education, right? So I work with clients one-on-one now and talking with them. It's really easy to relate to them because I can understand them because I've seen it, for a long time.
You've seen it or you've been there or, a bartender sometimes is a damn counselor coach. And, I don't know about the hypnosis side of things, but, with enough drinks, you can probably hypnotize anybody or at least make them believe they are.
What's funny about that is I think most people are hypnotized when they come into the bar already. They're mesmerized by the labels. Oh, I'm a Johnny Blue or a Johnny Black man. All that branding is hypnosis. So.
Damn, I had never thought about that from that perspective. But, you're right, is everybody's got their poison. And part of the gig of the bartender is you remember what that person's particular poison is. Or you have a few drinks up your sleeve when you get the particular type of people. You get the little college girl that's trying to impress her friends. You get something fruity and, you whip that together. You get the dude who's trying to be tough guy, impress his friends, and you make a drink that just punches him in the face, and you just have all these in your repertoire all the way there. I never thought about it that. Well, I think it's more than just the packaging and labeling because when they're walking into that bar, they're looking for a release and escapism. So they're already programming themselves that this is going to get them out of one state of mind and into another.
Yep, that's exactly right. They're looking for a way to get out of their own mindset, their own insecurities, and try to figure out a way to release all that and just be themselves for a moment.
Yeah. Because it's funny is you can watch the most introverted person come into a bar, get them a couple of glasses of liquid courage, and now they're the life of the freaking party until they realize that in somewhere along the way that they're not this person, and then they freak out and then they go home early. Or they go home with somebody else, but that's wild. So 13 years slinging drinks. I mean, I've got some friends that have done that, but do you think you did that more out of necessity or was that because you were still trying to figure yourself out all those years? Because I had a lot of careers out there early on trying to figure myself out. So I'm curious, 13 years slinging drinks, what took you so long?
Yeah, so a lot of that was that story about money.
Yeah.
You go into the bar, you got 4 hours, it's a good gig, everybody, it's easy. You don't have to think about it, you're on autopilot. And, there's not many jobs where you can just do this and hand it out to someone.
Right.
And they give you $1 in exchange for that. Like, that's a wild world that we live in, right? Like, there's so little value in that, but tips are great. I'd get paychecks that were 15 cents for a 2-week paycheck. But I'd be making, my rent and my car payment, my insurance and all that.
That's the draw. I mean, we still got one check that was 1 cent. They actually cost them more to print the check and mail it to me, right? They didn't even hand it to me. They put a stamp on it for 1 cent. But the fun thing, and there's still times that I miss bartending, is because you were guaranteed to always have cash in your pocket. Right.
Absolutely.
There would never be a day go by that you didn't have cash because if you were getting short, you just called somebody up and you knew somebody wanted a night off, right? You just go pick up their shift and you make a couple $100 that night and life is good. And if you were going to be short on bills, you went and picked up a day shift and a night shift, and you just doubled down on it. So makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah, there was definitely a few years there where I was working day job, night job, weekend job, and I was just, paying off student loans, paying off the car, and there's some of that successful stuff where it's like you're willing to get in and get your hands dirty and do the work and pick up the hours and work hard. But it's funny because now that I'm on the other side of it, I realize that was actually fear telling me to do that. It was fear that if I stepped into the day job 100%, that I wouldn't have that cash laying around, or that if I kept that day job for however many years I kept it and didn't start going to business for myself. It's the same kind of actual little mental roadblock of fear there.
Right. Well, you should have got a life partner. I found my wife, during my bartending journey, and, that was, for me, was part of the trigger that said, okay, dude, you got to grow back up again. It's time to, go get a big boy job again, and got me out of it. So who knows?
It's funny you say that. I did exactly that. So I met a woman, we dated for a few years. We got engaged. We got married. We got divorced. But during the 3 years that we were married, that was my on and off. That was the off part. So yeah,
right.
I felt like I would grow up and do the real man thing and leave the bar and just do the day gig. And it was interesting because I went from doing like 90 hours a week down to like 50 or 60. And I also went from drinking 5 nights a week to drinking, one night a week. And I don't know if it was the change in the drinking, the change in the funds, the change in myself, but something didn't work that well. And so that relationship did not last.
I've got a gal who came on my show, Danielle Baldino, and, she talks about she was in the Navy, and her husband were both in the military, and their entire relationship, they were just plastered. They drank so much that when she finally got sober and got away from the bottle, she was like, she had nothing in common with this guy. I mean, it didn't even understood why they hung out, why they did anything. It was constantly hidden under, in her case, a couple of wine bottles, and so she always wondered if part of the reason she drank so much was because she knew subconsciously she really didn't care for this guy. It's interesting. So you get out of this whole bartending thing. Where do you go from there?
Yeah. So when I was working at getting coffee for the financial types, that depression hit me pretty hard in the drinking. So I put on a good 30, 40 pounds and I was no longer healthy. Right. So There's a lot of drinking, a lot of late night food, a lot more boozing, and kind of had no direction. So my tips went down at the bar. And I don't know.
Guys, just for the record, sex sells. That's proof.
And I don't know if it was the extra pounds or my attitude, right? Either way. So I started running because I thought, if I got it fit, like I'd be getting more, my tips would go back up. I'd feel better. And so instead of slowing down on the booze, I'd be drinking like a 30 pack of Coors Light a day. I decided to run it off. And I was doing 27 miles a day for a few weeks there. And I got broken and battered, man. I was torn meniscus, stress fractures on my feet, back pain, knee pain. And I'm a young kid at this time. I was like 22 doing this, right? And at 23, I went to the doctor. They thought I had testicular cancer because I was coming blood.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. It turned out I wasn't. I didn't have testicular cancer. I was just running so much that the shaking of my testicles during the run was enough to actually tear some of the vas deferens to where it was actually bleeding internally.
Holy shit. I have never heard that in my life. And I don't ever want to experience that in my life.
It's pretty shocking, right?
Well, for you or your partner, I mean, yeah.
Everybody, right? What is wrong with this picture? Something is not right.
And can I catch it? Whatever it is, right? Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Pretty eye-opening, pretty shocking. I remember going to the doc and showing him a picture, right? I was like, I don't know how to explain it to this guy. I'm like, What is this is not the normal color. This is not normal. What is happening?
Right. So now you're a young guy having to go to the doctor and say, dude, something broke. And you have picture footage of that brokenness. So
yeah, he wasn't excited to see that picture.
No, I'm sure he wasn't. But in the back of my head, I'm like, dude, you signed up to be a doctor. You knew you were getting crazy shit. So that's on you, buddy.
Right? I'll tell you about this. I'm really fucked, right? Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. Turns out it wasn't testicular cancer, so that was great.
Congrats.
But yeah, exactly. That was nice. It was just running too much. So instead of going for another run,
okay. So just for everybody listening, this is why I don't run, for fear I'm going to crack a nut and bleed. So there's my excuse.
There you go. Oof. That's a good excuse. It's a good excuse.
I'm using it from here on out.
Yeah. I love that. Please benefit from that story.
Something good's got to come from it, right?
Right. So I went to a gym and I met a guy and he was like, hey, you don't need to run that much to get in shape. he was like, maybe tone down the drinking a little bit and let's do some weight training. So that was actually the first time in my life I started lifting weights. And at the end of a year of hanging out with him, I started actually becoming a trainer. So that was good. So that was how I got into strength training. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah. So I didn't know you went the strength training route. So was it bodybuilding or was it just, helping people get better in shape?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it was deadlifts, squats, pull-ups, bench, kind of like powerlifting stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a guy out of Utah named Dan John who's a pretty cool strength coach and kind of following hip hinge, squat, carry, press.
Okay.
Kind of the routine. So I was teaching teachers in their 50s how to get their ass below their knees and be able to lift heavy weights with goblets, squats, and kettlebells and shit. So it was pretty fun. They were like really empowered by doing that. So during the day, I'm hanging out with these ladies in their 50s, teaching them that they're stronger than their high school sons. And I had a teacher who would actually strength train with the football team, and she'd show the coach a couple of movements and stuff. It was pretty fun. I got pretty deep into it, and seeing her results was pretty inspiring. And then I'd go to the bar at night and I'd pour drinks for these kids and, the teachers that were there for happy hour trying to drown their sorrows away.
Right. Because teachers can drink. Trust me. Teachers can flat out throw them back. I mean, they got to deal with so much crap in these kids that man, they love a good margarita. And I'm not saying every teacher's that way. I know I'm going to catch hell over that. Somebody's going to be like, you just said all teachers are alcoholics. No, I said teachers like to drink. Big difference. Right?
There's a big difference. And if anybody's got a reason, right? If anybody has a reason to drink.
Right.
Yeah. It's a lot of responsibility.
It is, Yeah. And not one that I want. I've got so much respect for the teachers. There's no way I could be the guy in that classroom. I just don't have the patience. Yeah. Do you think, though, doing the strength training, being that was kind of your first real stunt into coaching people, that's what sparked where you're at now? Was that kind of the seed that got planted?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. That change that I felt in myself, like for me to be able to walk into a gym and be like, something's broken, literally. And, here's $3,000. I got to figure something else out, right? I didn't know what I was doing when I walked in and bought personal training. And then coming out the other side, having lost the 40 pounds and gotten a lot stronger and being a completely different person, that gave me the confidence to go and quit drinking. That gave me the confidence to stop bartending or, work in that 9-to-5 corporate job where everyone's miserable. And it was a little different to be able to light up people's life and show them some change and build their self-confidence. And I experienced it firsthand, so it was really fun to be able to show other people that that's an option too.
Well, and here's what I like about that story is I run into a ton of coaches. I mean, I live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and I've been told, I've never seen this number proven anywhere, but the number's been thrown around. There's something like 100,000 coaches in the DFW marketplace. Okay.
Wow.
There just can't be that many coaches that have had enough life experiences they go through that they can teach somebody else. I jokingly love to say that most coaches, are just unemployable salespeople. Right.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
They had a sales job or they had something they were doing. They just couldn't hack it. And so now they're all of a sudden a coach. So I love the fact that you were teaching something that you personally went through, and now you're passing that forward to someone else to help them with their own transformation, which is a lot what coaching should be.
Yeah, that's all it is, right? So someone, lit the way for me, and my candle's burning bright. I got to use that to light someone else's,
Yeah. And that's huge. I believe we all have this kind of internal flame, and, when we feed it by our outside influences, whether it's books, whether it's inspirational music tape, whatever we feed that flame, the bigger it goes, it starts lighting everybody else's flames. And that's just, proof there. I love that. So how long did you do that?
Did that. Let's see. I started that in 2004, and I stopped doing that in 2012.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's 8 years. 8 years of that.
So burned out or found a new passion?
No, yeah. So because I had my business background when I was in school, I started becoming the boss. So after being a trainer and a strength coach, they put me in charge of other trainers and other strength coaches. And at the end of my career of being a strength coach, I spent most of my time behind the desk for a good 2 to 3 years. And while I was sitting there, I couldn't run, I couldn't squat. And I ended up getting this terrible hip pain. And so for 2 years, I went to a ton of other doctors. And I was like, hey, man, Friday night, I'm in 10 out of 10 pain and it's in my right hip. This is an interesting story. So I showed up to the ER I'm like, my right hip hurts. So they're doing x-rays and MRIs and nothing comes back. And so they do some palpatory assessment there, right? Which means on a Friday night at 11 o'clock, I'm in the ER with deep groin pain in my right hip. And the treating physician is like, actually has his hand in there, right? Like, and then once again,
you got some jacked up doctor stories.
It's just like, I haven't realized till right now that it's almost the same story, right? Like, oh, man. Yeah. So I'm at this guy's office and he looks at me and he gives me this like discerning eye, like, great. There's nothing wrong with you, man. Like your pain. There's people that are shot in the next room. Like you have to complain about this hip pain, like this groin pain. Get out of here, right? And like I went to see him to have him touch my testicles. Like that's what it like. Oh man.
Maybe you should go see a hypnotist. You might have a problem.
So the next step of that, after like all the doctor medical model for 2 years, was just open up the hip and see what they could find, and they'll find something to stick back together, right? Could have been a labor and tear, testicle torsion. There's a ton of like referred pain that can go in there. They could have diagnosed something, but that seemed pretty scary to me, right? I'm like 27-ish kid, like that shouldn't be a problem. 28 at the time. So I went and got on a guy's table. He put his thumb in my pectineus, moved my hip around, had me go run around his building, and then he had a squat rock in the back because he's kind of a meathead, like closeted meathead, even though he's a doctor. And my hip pain felt amazingly better. So at the end of that year, I'd sent all of my clients to him and all of my trainers' clients to him. And that guy came in at 10 o'clock in the morning, left at 6. It was cash-based practice. Everybody loved seeing him because as soon as they left him, they felt better. And then everyone's coming to see me at 5 in the morning, bitching about waking up, not having food. I'm just lecturing people all day. I was like,
anyway, there's a flawed business model somewhere in here.
Right. Yeah. I'm selling something that people don't want. I'm asking them to do shit they don't want to do. Right. Everybody loves seeing this guy. He's making more money than me. He's having a lot, and everyone loves hanging out with him. So, and they get better results. So I went back to school so I could get a license to touch so I could do the same thing he did. And the technique he was using was something called active release technique, which is kind of cool. It's mostly used by chiropractors for their soft tissue work because they're not manual therapists or massage therapists rather. So I went back to school so I could go and teach myself or go learn that stuff and then use that on my clients. I thought my business would be better. Clients would get better results. And at the end of that, that's how I got out of the strength training, like being the boss at the gym, telling other people how to do all that stuff. And I opened my own practice. I worked with a bunch of dancers because my ex-wife, who was my wife at the time, was a dance instructor. So I was helping those people, and they're amazing athletes.
All right, I got to ask, what kind of dance?
Yeah, that's a great question. Sexy jazz. So the stuff that Beyonce does on stage.
Wait, that is a term of dancing, sexy jazz. I'm going to have to go find a YouTube video on sexy jazz and explain to my wife why I'm watching a sexy jazz dance video.
Yeah. I can still remember the first time I went to a dance studio, and this was a few years ago, so it was Loosen Up My Buttons Babe by the Pussycat Dolls was the song that these girls were dancing to. And these girls are children. I shouldn't say children. They're like 8 to 11. And they were dancing like burlesque dancers, right? Because that's the style of that they were learning. And as a straight male, I was just blown away by this, right? And then the music cuts, and then these girls go from being these like vixens dancing to the Pussycat Dolls to being children. Yep. And it was just so wild to me. And two things impressed me with that. Like one, music and costuming can set the tone for anything. And then two, like, the woman I was dating was really good at her job. So she can turn these children into dancing a sexy number, right?
Well, I had a similar experience with my niece when she first got into cheerleading. All the little cheerleaders came over, and she was 9, 10 years old, and all the little cheerleaders came over, and they're jamming music in the living room, and I'm watching these little girls dancing and like, oh, holy shit, they shouldn't be dancing like that. But they're not my kids, right? So, my brother's there. I mean, there was nothing wrong with the style of dancing. It was appropriate for what they were doing for the cheerleading. But as an uncle who's the cool uncle, I'm like, is that right? Should they be doing that? But same thing, as soon as the music's off and everything else, they're out in the backyard playing and everything else. They're just doing, their particular routine. So that's wild, and I'm still going to go look up a sexy jazz dance routine. And then I'm going to tell my wife she's got to perform that later.
There you go. Yeah.
That's awesome. So, wow. What a cool ride so far. So where'd you go? So now you opened up your own practice.
Yep. So my own practice. So I had a Olympic lifting platform, squat rack, Airdyne, massage table in like a little nook of this dance studio. And so I would see clients there, and Olympic lifters would show up with elbow pain, neck pain, back pain. And we treat it, and then they'd show me their movement again. Be like, okay, that's great. We treat it again. We give them a little fix, educate them. They do it on their own. And then the other half of the practice was these dancers would come in, and they're putting their leg up to their knees by their ear, right, and turning as many times as they possibly can. And then they go back to normal, and they're like, my back hurts, my knee hurts.
Well, obviously, your body is not meant to bend that way.
Yeah. And it's a sport, right? And they got to make it look easy and put a smile on their face while they're doing it. So that's where I kind of cut my teeth in the manual therapy world, was working with those professional athletes. And I call them that even though they're 12, because they've been doing it for 6 years,
Right.
So,
well, I mean, you add just 1 or 2 more years and they're on their way to the Olympics. So, I mean, they are professional athletes at that point. Jeez.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's a pretty interesting scenario to be, late 20s, putting your hands on someone who's 8 years old, right? And you're working on hips and things. So, I'd always have dad in the room, and I would actually call him over, or mom, and have them do the release work themselves. So that way I'm hands off. I'm just
right.
there. And that way when we're at competition, these children at competition, their parents know how to handle the situation when it comes up, right? So,
well, that's cool, because you wouldn't, maybe a physical therapist might do that, but you're not going to get a traditional doctor to walk somebody through how to solve something that only their certificate on the wall says they're approved to do, That's pretty cool. So I gotta understand, how in the hell did hypnotism, I can't even say the damn word, come into play in all this? I mean, that's just an odd twist to throw on top of all of it.
Yeah, and I thought so too, right? Like you said, 8 years old, and everyone was like, I'm going to be a hypnotist.
Right.
Yeah, so I had that studio. My ex and I split up, and we worked together. So, within less than 24 hours, I closed the business, moved out, started all over. And I went to go work for another big box gym again, and took the skills that I had learned and was trying to teach other people how to do that and grow my business, and got put in a position of authority. And it was great. And then I found out, you're talking about these salespeople, right? And how they're coaches, but they're people that just don't like selling anymore. So they're selling themselves, which is probably easier. I was working with massage therapists, and I don't know if you know many massage therapists, but they tend to be fairly reserved, pretty shy and quiet people. They tend to want to let their hands do the talking for them.
I never thought about that, but you're right.
Yeah. So the environment they were working in, they were actually they weren't independent contractors. They're W-2 employees. But the way the company looked at it is, look, you have millionaires walking in the door that have a vested interest in moving better and feeling better. You have the skills. You're the professional. It's your job to get them on your table for consistent business. And in their mind, they're like, we did our job. There's millionaires right there. Just go touch them on the shoulder and let's get this done.
Right.
But these sharing, caring people felt like sales is a bad word. They felt like it was like how I felt about broccoli when I was 8.
Right. How I feel about broccoli now. So, I mean, I still get it, right?
Yeah, exactly. So in their mind, it's a bad word, right? And it just makes them nauseous in their stomach. So it was trying to figure out how to coach them into being able to build a thriving business, doing something they loved. Man, that took I was back at the drawing board trying to figure this out, starting over again, right?
Yeah.
And we tried to do as much work consciously as we could. And I think we did a pretty good job at it. We made some changes. But in the process, I came into the idea of concepts of limiting beliefs. Sales is bad. If you have to sell something, you're not good at being a massage therapist. And these were kind of the stories I heard. And I'd heard them before as a trainer, right? Like, oh, I need to get in shape before I get a trainer, or I'm not worth investing money in, or these kind of concepts or these ideas, or I'm not worth showing up for 5 a.m. and eating right and putting care in. And then when I was bartending, I saw all those same people dropping the same type of cash, instead of going $100 for a training session, they were going $100 for a bar bill that night, right? Right. So there's another way around it, right? And so it was interesting. So I went and got hypnotized because I had my own limiting beliefs, my own subconscious stuff. And at the end of one 60-minute session, 6 weeks after that, the team I was responsible for went from 95% to 110% in their revenue targets. And that was just me getting hypnotized.
Right.
And I was like, all right, holy shit, there's something here, right? If you could just change me and the way I interact with people, and I can affect that many people.
Well, let's talk about it a little bit, because and here's why. So I believe that there's different skill levels in everything. So
Absolutely.
my experience with hypnotism could have been that the person I worked with was just not a very advanced skill level. I'm just throwing that on the table.
Absolutely.
But I had a gentleman reach out to me when I spent, before I opened my own company, I was a national sales trainer. So I traveled the country teaching people how to do sales. And God love you, brother. Teaching people that don't want to sell how to sell is very hard. Very hard to do. So good on you. But this gentleman reached out to me, and he was convinced that he was going to hypnotize me to, in his words, help me conquer the world.
I love that.
Right? So I went to the guy now, and I will say I went in there with an open mind. I had no preconceived notions. I was really, okay, let's see if this will work.
Yeah, absolutely.
This guy was a mountain of a man, very large guy. He grabs me by the head, slams me into his chest, says something, releases me, and then says, "You're hypnotized." All right?
Okay.
And he says, keep your eyes closed, and we're going to go through the process. And then he just starts asking me questions and waiting for me to respond. It was the most bizarre experience. So one, obviously I was never hypnotized. Two,
Fair.
Afterwards, he asked me how it goes, and I'm like, well, nothing happened. He goes, well, you're fixed. I'm like, well, I didn't come in here broken, And so I left his office, and the funny thing is I finally had to have a lawyer call him, because he was telling people in the community that we lived that he had fixed me and made me the success I am through his practice. So
I mean, this guy sounds like he was a pretty good salesman. You know what I mean? He's like, hey, let's find someone who's successful, and then let's take credit for that success. Right. And then the more successful you become, the more his success rises as well, right?
Right. That was a great plan. Didn't work, but it was a great plan.
Yeah.
So walk me through what.
Jeez.
Because my wife showed me a video of, God, what is it? One of the Howie Mandel, everybody does the performances to America's Got Talent. That's what I'm looking for. And there's an episode on America's Got Talent where this hypnotist actually hypnotizes Howie Mandel. And Howie Mandel is, of course, a germaphobe and doesn't like shaking hands or anything else. And literally Howie is out in the crowd shaking hands, hugging people, and, just doing things he's not do. I mean, to the point that, everybody is freaking out over what this guy was able to do with Howie. So I'm on that cuff of there's something really there.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm on that cuff of there's this magician stagehand BS, out there. So walk me through what hypnotism is, what it does, and how it potentially really helps people. And I will try and keep my skepticism stuff at bay.
Here's the thing is, I love the skepticism. So the more you have, the better, right? Because what that is your critical mind, where it's trying to assimilate new information to what you already know. And just for the record, the worst words in the human language are "I know." Right. Because as soon as you say those two words, you've stopped all learning process. Continue. 100%. Yeah, that's exactly right. And so you're trying to fit it in is what it is, okay, so here's this new evidence, and then here's my experience. Can I make room for this? And then if I do make room for that, what does the world look like now, right? And that's how we learn. And what's funny is the learning process is actually hypnosis. It's a hyper learning state. So before you develop your critical mind at like 8 to 12, where you feel like you kind of know how things are and you've learned these associations, you like dogs, someone else hates dogs, we have different experiences. When we see the word dog or the word vegetables, we have different physiological reactions to it. And all that is a subconscious shortcut. So we don't have to think about every single time you see a dog, do I like dogs? Do I not like dogs? Right? And so we can keep moving forward. And the more of these process and programs we have, the faster we can move through life, the more success we can have, the more failures we can have. All that's good. And that is kind of what hypnosis is the idea is to get you into a situation where you're more relaxed, you kind of go from a beta, gamma state oscillations in your brain down to theta alpha, which is something you pass into right before you go to sleep. Something that Einstein does when he has his little daydreaming moments and he has these aha eureka moments. And in that state, you're kind of a little bit more susceptible to your environmental things. And because you're so relaxed, if someone was to have you imagine a dog and you're relaxed, it wouldn't trigger those physiological responses. And the more real you can make that in your mind, the more you can kind of create an affinity or at least something neutral for that dog if you had a negative experience in the past. And so then you basically have said, I've learned that dogs are bad. And now I've learned that maybe they're not as bad as I thought they were. Now I'm more open to learning it again. And as a child, a dog's huge and scary. And even if it's excited to see you and licking your face, you think it's attacking you, right?
So here's my question. When you learn something, experiencing something, and they've actually proven that you're creating new ruts in your brain. It's where the phrase stuck in a rut comes from, because you're stuck in one thought process, right? So 100%. Are you saying, or am I hearing it wrong, are you saying that through hypnotism you can change that rut?
That's exactly right.
That's a bold-ass statement.
Yeah.
Because some of those ruts are deep as hell because of the experiences and things that people have been through. 100%. So let's go to something that people can relate to. So if somebody has a fear of cold calling, which is a legitimate fear of cold calling, you're telling me if they could sit through a session with you and cure that fear.
Yeah, it's not just with me.
Well, all right, fair enough. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of people. I mean, it's not like you're, in a Superman cape here, but
right.
But if you were, it'd be pretty cool. I'm just saying. But
I got the glasses, so I could take them off.
You got the whole Clark Kent thing going on, right?
Yeah.
So, but through hypnotism, people can actually reprogram themselves.
Yeah. So what it is they can deprogram themselves because they've learned that cold calling is bad for some reason.
Right.
So the idea is they've learned this and they've decided this. And so now anytime that they pick up that phone call or think about picking up that phone call, it triggers that learning pattern. And that's great. That's how we learn, right? The problem is if they've decided that they've learned forever and they're done, but their job requires them to do that task, now we have a conflict in the conscious mind. I have this subconscious belief that cold calling is terrible. And I have this conscious desire that I need to pay my motherfucking bills.
Right.
Fuck. And then that conflict actually induces anxiety and distress. So sometimes you're hiking or running or climbing and it's a eustress. You're at the gym. You're going to do one more rep. Like that's actually a positive stress you can adapt to. You're stronger for it. But when you have distress, when you have this conflict between your subconscious knowing and then the requirements of your conscious desires, and they've now hit up against a wall, that's when you get implode and you need to go drink. You're super anxious. You're freaked the fuck out and you're broken.
So what about somebody who struggled with finances their entire life? They grew up in a household where, right? He's over here waving at me, but they grew up in a household where they didn't talk about money. Maybe it was a religious thing. Money was evil. Maybe it was a family thing. It was impolite to talk about money. Nobody ever taught them anything about money. And now they consistently struggle with it. There's the absolute desire to change, but there's such a deep-ass rut of that's their belief system. How are you changing that? Yeah,
I love that. That's a great question. So it's proven that if I get in an argument with you and we're arguing, right, and I'm trying to convince you of my idea and you're trying to convince me of your idea, the only convincing that's been done at the end of it is that you've further convinced or entrenched that belief in yourself. You've made that rut in your brain just a bit deeper.
Right.
And I've also done the same thing. And now, hopefully, we're still friends and can shake hands and have a beer, right? No big deal. Or we can get emotionally triggered because it's such a deep-rooted belief that we're like, fuck you, I hate that guy. That guy's a jerk, right?
Right.
But if we're not talking to that conscious part of you and we're talking to the subconscious part of you, and you're telling me a story about belief and money, and I'm looking for the holes in that story, because there's no real, it's a belief, it's a theory, it's an idea, it's a sentiment, it's a notion. It's not true. Money's not good or bad. It is what you believe it is.
Yeah, it's just an object, right?
Yeah. And you make it, if you choose to say it's bad, then you make it bad. You look for the proof that makes it bad. That's confirming your confirmation bias. But if we try to take that down to neutral and we just say, hey, and you're in a hyper suggestible state, you're open to learning. You're in that state where you're able to learn things. We're no longer arguing with that critical mind. We're talking to the subconscious that's willing to learn something new. And because you're talking to that part of it, you're not changing the belief, and you're not saying it's dumb or silly. You're saying that is one story. And if I choose to believe this, this is true. Is that also the only way to make that true? Or are there other things that could be true because of that? And if you're a skilled educator and you can talk in people's belief systems and you can talk to that part that's not the critical filter, right, where you're butting up against all their confirmation bias, and they're willing to learn, and they're not in an anxious state where you're triggering all of that natural physiology, that reactive state, you can make some progress. And then if you do that over and over and over and over again, you can absolutely change or reprogram the subconscious mind. It's just learning. It's just learning.
Well, I'm going to take that just learning. It's learning via a different style, right?
Correct.
Because people learn from so many different ways. You know, you get the auditory, visual, kinesthetic, all of that stuff. You know, you're just adding another dimension into learning styles. Where I still get hung up is that financial belief within people it's deep. I mean, for a lot of people. I mean, it's not like I can sit down with anybody and they can read a book in 1 hour and be magically changed because they read a book or because they went to a seminar and they went to any learning style. How many sessions is somebody going to have to go through with you to break that belief? Deprogram, in your words, that belief.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think there's two answers here. The first answer, and this is the fun one, is one session. And then the second answer is as many as they need. Because here's the thing, if at the end of the first session you don't decide it's worth investing your time in, don't do it, right? If you don't see or feel or like kind of have a shift, it's not your answer, or it's not your time, or maybe that's not the person to work with. But if you feel that change and you feel something different, like there's a little shift and it's subtle, it's not as anxiety inducing when you vision $1 bill or $2 or $20 or whatever it may be. If you can consciously say out loud, like, no, I'm worth the $3,000 or $6,000 or $30,000 or $300,000. And you can say that straight faced and your heart rate doesn't go up 2, 3, 4, 5, 20 beats per minute. You're not breaking out in sweat. You're not like clammy all over. Your butthole doesn't tighten. Right? Like,
right.
Something happens.
How much does desire play into it?
Yeah, you have to be, just like learning. You can't teach someone that doesn't want to learn, and someone who wants to learn, you can't stop them from doing it.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, I associate it with when I quit smoking.
100%.
Is up until the point when I haven't smoked in 10 some odd years. I never really tried to quit smoking before I quit because I had no desire to quit. There was no reason to.
Right.
Hence my father-in-law having a massive heart attack that almost killed him. I looked at my wife and said, I'll never smoke a cigarette ever again. And I never did. Right. It was a conscious, true choice. Now that same father-in-law, before he passed away, earlier this year, I saw him constantly battling himself to walk away from those cigarettes, and I could never get through to him that it's 100% desire. He has no desire to quit. And his response was, I've been smoking since I was 15 or 14. I've got over 50 years of smoking under my belt. It's not that easy. And I'm like, up until I smoked, I started at 14 and, I had almost 20 years of smoking and at my worst 4 packs a day, and was able to just walk away from it because I made a real choice to do it. And he never wanted to make that choice. But I firmly believe had I not had the desire to walk away from those cigarettes, I would have never walked away from them.
I think there's a couple parts of that. Thanks for sharing that story, because I think this is a phenomenal example of this. You had a conscious desire to want to walk away.
Right.
And then you had an emotional trigger where a man you clearly love, as you referred to him as your father, not just your father-in-law, right? You're like, my father. Oh, wait, I mean my father-in-law, for clarification, right?
Right.
You care about this man as if he's your father. And you saw what he was putting himself through, and part of you identified with that and said, I don't want that anymore. And I would argue that that's part of your subconscious mind and how much you value yourself, and then seeing how much it's hurting you and your wife, seeing him suffer through all this. And so now you have this subconscious belief, desire, emotion that's like, fuck that, not for me. And then you have this conscious, oh man, I've been smoking and I don't even know why. I've never really wanted to quit, but it's just something I do. It's who I am, but I don't want to be that man. And then that subconscious and that conscious decision work together. And as long as those two are together, anything's easy. Everything is easy.
I like it. I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So since there's other people like you out there, I just put you in your own category of weirdness. So, you people, how do people find somebody that's more geared like you are and not have the same experience that I had when they're looking for a hypnotist? I think
that's a great question. And two things. There are a lot of people, because this is the Wild West, and I'm out in California, so it's extra wild. It's like metaphysically wild out here. Right?
Yeah, it's definitely a whole new world over there, brother.
Oh man, yeah, and I get it. I definitely get it. It's fun. It's fun for me. I would argue that there are a lot of people. There's not a regulating board. It's the Wild West, and so anybody can call themselves a hypnotist. There is a union. It's called the American Hypnosis Association, and there's a president of the union right now. His name's Bruce Bonnet. He's a great guy. He actually went to school with Ted Cruz at Harvard Law. And so he's a pretty, that's a pretty prestigious school. I don't know about how you feel about Ted Cruz, but Obama was also there at the same time in the graduating class. So however you want to go with that one too. But if you're a member of that union, I would argue that you are probably not someone who got certified in 8 hours on the weekend to do stage hypnosis. You're not some guy that got a wild hair up his ass. You're someone that went to school for a year, which is not a long time, right? But it is enough to actually care about it and show up and do all that fun stuff. I would go and interview them. I would have a conversation with them. I would ask your friends and family about them. I'd ask ex-clients of his if they got something. Just like you're hiring someone for a job, you're hiring this person to take your conscious desire and your unconscious conflict with that desire and get those two to line up. It's a pretty serious gig. If you got money to spare, go get a session, see how it feels, leave. If you don't like it, great. But I would do some homework. I'd do some research. I would check out and see if they're a member of the union. If they're a graduate of Hypnosis Motivation Institute over here in California, I would argue that they've had more training than most, and the quality of training is pretty good. They've been around for 50 years. They do something called hypnotherapy, not hypnosis, which I would argue is a better. I'm biased.
It sounds better, all right.
It sounds better, but it's a real consideration. So I would do some homework.
Yeah, I like that, and that's great advice for no matter who you hire, right? Whether it's a coach, whether a hypnotherapist, whether it's a mentor, trainer, whatever. Do your damn homework. Do
your homework
before you get it done. Dude, Garrett, this has been awesome, brother. How do people find you if they want to get exposed to your world and let you inside their heads? How do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, I love that. It's actually me being exposed to their world, right? It's not about me at all. That's pretty funny. Yeah, you want to hang out with me more, right? So I have a website. It's called Gnosis Therapy. Yeah, it's a silent G, right? So it's GNOSIS therapy, right? And that's www.gnosistherapy.com. Or they can shoot me a text if they want. This is the 21st century. I answer my own phone. So
it's amazing, right?
Yeah, it's wild, right? But shoot me a text at 714-328-8783. Please, no weirdos super late at night.
No random video chats, nothing like that, please.
Nothing like that. Yeah, I'm here to help. But anyway, and there's a lot of information on my website about, the medical history of hypnosis and how it helps people with different little fears and things that come up that stop them from being successful. If you want to go out and conquer the world.
Oof, you're hypnotized.
Boom.
That's awesome. Yeah. So here's how I like to wrap up every show, brother. And I do stump some people with this, so be forewarned. If you were going to leave my listeners or champions, people that are entrepreneurs, business owners, and people who are just going through life, what would be that phrase, mantra, saying, slogan, something that they could use as they're moving through their journey, especially if they're stacked up against it and going through it? What would be that slogan you would say, remember this?
Yeah. All right. Let's see if I can do this here. All right. So I think, I think there's really good news for people that are in that situation. And I think the best part of that news is that they're actually the problem. The problem isn't out there. They're the problem. And then the best part about that is if they're the problem, then they're actually the solution.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Should get that put on a T-shirt.
Yeah.
So, Garrett, brother, it's been awesome having you on the show, man. I've really enjoyed it. Thanks for letting me pick on you a little bit and have a little fun. Thanks for letting us into your story. I think we're going to stay in touch, my friend, and some good things coming up down the road for the both of us. So,
looking forward to it. Thank you for having me. It was really fun.
Thanks for listening to Donnie Success Champions podcast. If you'd like to hear more about our current guest today, or if you'd like to hear stories from our other guests on the show, come hang out with us on our website at successchampspodcast.com. I really appreciate you tuning in. If you need to reach out to me for any reason, you can catch me at Donnie@DonnieBoivin.com.